How many of you have heard of Arthur Conan Doyle? Raise your hand up. Well, he's the author of the famed Sherlock Holmes novels. And Doyle was a bit of a practical joker. On one day, as on a lark, for a laugh, he jotted out a little note and sent it to 12 of his closest friends. And on the note were written these words, "Flee at once, all is discovered." What would you do if you got a note like that? Or an email or a text? Flee at once, all is discovered. Now, I don't know what kind of friends Doyle had, but within 24 hours, all 12 of his friends had left the country. That's what you call having a guilty conscience. Now, what do you think about when the word conscience comes up? Do you think of Jiminy Cricket, who was deputized to be the conscience for little Pinocchio, who was told when he didn't know what to do, just give a little whistle and always let your conscience be your guide? What exactly is a conscience? One person said, conscience is that inner voice that warns us somebody may be looking. Another said, conscience is what hurts when everything else feels so good. And even another said, conscience doesn't always keep you from doing wrong, but it does keep you from enjoying it. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? The conscience is a bit like an alarm. You know, when you get into a plane, the pilots will have alarms there that might go off if the landing gear doesn't go down or come back up again. Or we have alarms in our cars that I don't think anyone listens to anymore if they are going off. And then I think all the alarm is good for now is finding your car when you lose it in a parking structure, right? And we have alarms in our homes, like a fire alarm. My fire alarm only goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not because there's a fire, but because it needs a new battery. And it lets out the largest chirp. And it's like, why does this always happen in the middle of the night? And the only way to stop it from chirping is I have to actually get up there and replace the battery. So the temptation is disable that alarm because I don't want to listen to that chirp, and that's a temptation with the conscience to ignore it or to try to disable it. One writer described conscience this way, quote, "The conscience is a built-in feature that haunts the sinner and helps the preacher. Some sins it makes us turn and run from, but mostly it simply takes the fun from." That's right. And actually, if your conscience is working and it is reminding you that something you are doing or something you have said is wrong, that is a good thing. That's what we all want. We want a conscience that is tender, a conscience that works properly. We don't want to try to disable it, and we certainly don't want to dull it, because the Bible warns that you can sear your conscience as with a hot iron. What does that mean? Well, have you ever burned yourself with an iron? Sometimes this happens to people because they do strange things with irons, like iron their hair and get a little burn mark here. It's even worse what I did once. I had a big red welt right here in my stomach, and my wife said, "What happened?" I said, "Don't even ask." Here's what happened. I was ironing, and I have one of these heavy-duty steam irons. I mean, I have a little button you push, and it lets out a blast of steam that's powerful. And so I had ironed my shirt, I put it on, and there was a wrinkle right in the middle. Now, a normal person would have taken this shirt off, put it back in the ironing board, and iron it. But no, I was in a rush, so I thought, I'll just give it a blast of steam. So I held the shirt out, and I screamed like a little girl. It hurt. And I had a red mark for like a month, okay? So don't try this at home because I'm not a professional. But when the Bible speaks of having your conscience seared as with a hot iron, the idea is having a conscience that is calloused and hard. Heard about a man that went to a psychiatrist and he complained, "I've been misbehaving, Doc, and my conscience is troubling me." The doctor asked him, "Do you want something that will strengthen your willpower?" He said, "No, I was hoping for something that would weaken my conscience." No, you don't want to do that. You want it to work. That's a good thing. And by the way, everybody has a conscience, the believer and the non-believer. You're born that way. God gave it to you. Romans 2:14 says, even when Gentiles, and contextually that would be speaking of a non-believer, even when a Gentile who does not have God's written law instinctively follow what the law says, they show that in their hearts they know right from wrong. They demonstrate that God's law is written within them, for their own conscience either accuses them or tells them what they are doing is right. Now, having established this, let me also add another thing. Your conscience is not infallible. And by that I mean there are times when your conscience might condemn you for something that actually is not wrong. The Bible even says if your heart condemns you, God is greater. So what we need to do is teach our conscience how to function properly. Martin Luther said, quote, "My conscience is captive to the word of God." So we want to effectively educate our conscience so it will do what it is supposed to do as designed by the Lord.